Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Joseph Mogel here again. Another video for you writers out there. This is in the same vein as my last video, the one on Creative Commons. This is covering a topic called fair use. Now, fair use is a set of laws that basically determines what is and is not copyright infringement, in a sense. It allows you as an author to use other people's work and other people to use your work as long as it doesn't cross certain boundaries. There are 4 parameters that are the definition of fair use under U.S. law. Now, I'm going to be talking about U.S. law in this. Now, there are internationally a number of other countries, a significant number of other countries that have fair use laws. Japan, Israel, England, France, Germany, Italy, Canada. They all have fair use laws. There are whole databases that describe them. Most of them fall into similar categories to the laws in the U.S., where there are particular parameters that define what is and is not fair use. Examples of fair use would be if you're writing a journal article, if you're writing a news piece, if you're archiving, if you're if you're using something for a parody, a critique, or a criticism. All these things fall into the category of fair use and are not copyright infringement. So you might be saying, well, what do you mean by this fair use parody thing, right? You can kind of understand maybe archiving. Librarians can work with other people's writing to archive and organize without infringing on the copyright because they're archiving it. A news site, journalists might be able to take someone else's work and put that information into a journal article because it's news. But some of the other things like parody, critique, criticism might be a little bit weird. And since it's weird, I'm going to use an example. It's not from writing, it's from music, but it's Weird Al Yankovic in this particular instance. And the interesting thing is that talking about Weird Al, in this instance, would qualify, I believe, as news and thus falls under the category of fair use. So when Weird Al Yankovic wrote and produced his song Amish Paradise, which is a parody of the rapper Coolio's Gangster's Paradise, you might have asked yourself, why didn't Coolio file a lawsuit? Why didn't he sue Weird Al for everything he was worth? Well, the whole piece was a parody. As a parody, it falls under fair use. You can parody pretty much anything. That's fair use. So, Amish Paradise was fair use of Gangster's Paradise because it was a parody. Now, that being said, there are 4 factors, like I said, that define what is fair use. The first one is whether or not you are parodying it directly or you are using someone else's work to parody or to critique something else. So let's say I take a copyrighted character of some kind and I use that character to make a statement about a political situation. That's not fair use. I'm using someone else's work to make a statement about another subject. But if I take someone's character and I make fun of them, I parody the daylights out of them, that's fair use. That's protected. Kind of an interesting idea. You can make fun of the subject directly, but you can't use the subject to directly attack something else. That's using the copyrighted character in a way that the author has a right to use, but that you, as a parodyist, don't. You can parody the character, you can't use the character to parody something else. That's number 1. Number 2, you can't copyright facts or ideas. I don't care how good an author you are, if you've written a story about Vietnam, you don't get to copyright the facts about the war in Vietnam. As an example, you cannot copyright facts or ideas. So, if within the context of someone else's work you take certain facts and ideas and you use them, that is not copyright infringement. This is where a lot of authors, I believe I mentioned this in an earlier video, talk about inspiration. You can take, no, I haven't talked about this yet, now that I think about it. This is going to be in a future video. Keep your eyes peeled. In a future video, I'm going to be talking about this extensively. But when you take inspiration, you're taking facts and ideas in part. And this is actually a big part of what a lot of professional authors do when they see certain trends in what becomes popular in writing. So that's point number 2. You can't copyright facts and ideas. Point number 3. All right, at this point, we're getting into something that's a little different. And this is, how much are you using? Are you taking the whole story? Are you taking part of the story? Are you taking a character? Are you taking a what amount? What is the amount? So the more you take, the more likely it is that you'll wind up getting in some legal hot water with copyright infringement. If you take 1 or 2 characters from a novel, you're probably not going to get in any trouble. If you take all the characters from a novel, you're most likely going to get in some hot water. It's hard to avoid. So how much you take has an effect. And lastly, is what you're doing undermining the value of the original work. If your work undermines the monetary value of the original work, it could be defined as copyright infringement. Now, ultimately, it's a court that gets to decide whether or not something is or is not fair use. And that would require the original author deciding to file a copyright infringement lawsuit. So that can be a bit of a challenge. Basically, as long as you don't copy an entire story and you stick to basic facts and ideas without taking whole characters, and you write using a different genre so that you're not undermining the original, you should be fine. I think personally, of the 4 categories, the first one, being able to use anything in a direct sense, particularly for parody, that's the most important one of all. Because generally, if you take someone else's work, you're most likely going to be parodying it. At least from my experience, that's what you're most likely going to be doing. Either that or you're taking inspiration from their work, in which case you fall into the category of you can't copyright facts and ideas. So those 2, to me, are the important ones. But it's up to you. You can do this. There's a ton of stuff to research on this. And if you so choose, or if you're from a country outside the U.S., there are tons of databases that list information regarding the laws of fair use in most countries that have fair use laws. So this is something to look up. This is something to be familiar with, particularly if you're working with something that might border on someone else's work, or if you're doing anything that would qualify as a parody. I've written stories that were parodies of other people's work, and I've never gotten in trouble because it's a parody and it's fair use. And were I to get in trouble, I could point out I'm parodying. I'm not using their characters to make fun of something else. I'm making fun of the characters directly. Mostly because they invite humor. But that's beside the point. So, that's fair use. This is a big topic that you can do a lot more research on, but for the most part, for most writers, a basic overview like what I've given is really all you really need. You could do a lot of delving into this, but it's probably not going to give you too much more than what I've just given you here in terms of practical, usable information. All right, so I've got to get this right eventually. Like and subscribe below. If you have any questions or comments, you can access my email through my YouTube or through my website. Hyperlink is in the description below. Thanks and cheers.